I will call the order of the Committee of the Whole work session here in the Mona Lisa Drexler Assembly Chambers in the Juanita Helms Administrative Center. Madam Clerk, may we have a roll call?
Yes, thank you. I would like to note for the record that Christopher Quist and Matt Cooper are excused tonight. Mr. Lejeski.
Here.
Mr. Tackey. Miss Major.
Here.
Mr. Roberts.
Here.
Mr. Gray.
Here.
Miss Dodge.
Here.
Mr. Lawrence.
Here.
You have a quorum.
All right. First thing I'd like to do is to make sure everyone knows where the exits are. There's 3 exits out of this room. They're all behind you. The main exit in the middle with the large opening, and then there's 2 doorways, one on each side, that will also get you out of this building fairly quickly. So be aware as to where they are. And we're going to proceed with memoranda reports and presentations, which today consists of the Interior Alaska Natural Gas Utility Board quarterly update by IGU representatives to include question and answer period. Mr. Britton, this is Dan Britton. I'll let you introduce yourself and whoever else may be participating in this.
Sure. Thank you very much. It's my pleasure to be here tonight. My name is Dan Britton. I'm the General Manager of the Interior Gas Utility and for now the President of Fairbanks Natural Gas and Titan, Alaska, as we continue to look at the integration of those 2 entities into a single entity as we move forward. Tonight we have with us a new board member of the IGU, Mr. Wilkin, which I'm sure does not need any introduction to any of you, and we're happy to have him on the board. Also, we have Michelle Hollowell, which has joined us recently, a couple weeks ago. Very important position as we move forward in customer service and conversion manager, and as Gary likes to say, a customer crusader. So increasing the demand on our system is going to be important as we move forward, so Michelle has a very important job. So it's an exciting update for me today because we're moving forward. We're not talking about things in progress. We're talking about things that are completed or in actual construction mode. So we see the light at the end of the tunnel, which for many of you I'm sure are wondering when that day would come. So tonight it's my pleasure to shine that light. So I'll go over a reminder of what the project goal is, which I'm sure most are familiar with. Talk about the recent close of the purchase and sale agreement between IGU and ADA, the additional activities we're working on, and what our next steps will be. As a reminder, our goals and our purpose is to bring low-cost energy to as many residents and businesses of Interior Alaska as possible, as quickly as possible, help to stabilize the economy, and help improve air quality. Some legislation that was recently completed. I think you received an update on this from your last update from JOMO, but both of the laws that were placed before the government have now been signed. So the legislation that passed in 2018 is signed into law. It includes the extension of the bonding authority that allows for ADA to facilitate up to $150 million in bonds for the Interior Energy Project. Those bonds have the moral obligation of the state of Alaska and are an important piece of our financing package. The other was the statutory authorization for on-bill financing, so a potential mechanism for us to help customers with financing of their conversions. And just one piece of the puzzle as we look at all the alternatives and all the ways that we're going to try and help customers through the conversion process. So as part of the sale between ADA and IGU, there was an RCA application that requested a change in control. That was approved. It was required for the close of the transaction. We've been working on a change of control letter with the North Slope pad to allow for any beneficial use of that pad to make sure it flows through into the project. We've still got some work to do with DNR, but it's making its way through the process. And finally, the PSA and the FA, for which you heard much about for an extended period of time, it was in negotiations for close to 2 years. It closed on June 13th. As of June 13th, 2018, our community now has a single gas utility. It's our utility. It's the Fairbanks North Shore Borough utility owned through the Interior Gas, through IGU. And so for the first time, we have one entity moving in one direction, all looking forward, looking to improve the access to natural gas and improve the economics and our help in any way we can with the air quality. So that was an exciting day. A couple of other exciting things that really start to give us the definitive date for gas supply availability, which we have not had for a number of years, is the large storage tank construction project that's going on in South Fairbanks. We started construction of a 5.25 million gallon tank in January with an estimated completion date of the fall of 2019. The project continues to advance on schedule. We're within about a week of the schedule that was put forward at the beginning, so things are moving along well.
Yeah, Mr. Roberts.
Okay, so you're still on the tank. Are you going to talk about the cost overruns?
I can talk about the cost overruns. I was not going to, but if you have questions about it, I can.
Yeah, I'd be interested in that and how something like Title 36 wages could be missed and what was happening in that process.
So the Title 36 wages specifically, when you say they were missed, they weren't included in past project estimates that were being advanced when FNG was a private entity, and then through FNG's ownership with Ada. Because FNG was taking loans from Ada, we didn't follow under the requirements for the Fair Wages Act. As we moved through the transaction and looking forward to the future of IGU ownership and we also have some state grant funds that were used in the project that changed. And so when we were finalizing our EPC before the contract was signed, we realized that we would have to change and have it follow the Fair Wages Act. And so we modified that and adjusted our budget at that time. As far as the balance of plant cost overruns, they're related to that issue somewhat in that we didn't add enough costs to our estimates to account for that. Additionally, we've run into some ground conditions that weren't expected. We've had to excavate an additional 5 feet of materials in the southern portion of the project where our balance of plant equipment is going. We've had some changes to scope where we've added additional vaporizer and additional boiler to give us some additional redundancy. Our initial approach was to do 2 times 100% units. We've now moved to 3 times 50%. It matches our growth profile a little better. It also gives us a little more, an increased security of supply out of that facility. And the bidding environment right now, the construction environment right now, when we went to bid for our, what we call a Phase 3A, we did only have 3 respondents. Following a public bid process now also, one of the respondents made an error on their bid. We had to reject it, and they were the low bidder by almost $250,000. It's a combination of a number of different things. It's a approximately $50 million project, and we're looking at if we have to utilize all of the contingency funds that we still have remaining in our budget, it would be a 10% cost overrun on the total project budget. Projects of this size, not making excuses, but it's not unheard of. And we're on a tight time frame. One of the things we had to do is move fairly quickly to get things moving so that we can try and get it in service prior to January 1st, 2020, so that we can qualify for the state of Alaska LNG tax credit. So we had to move things along fairly quickly on a tight time frame once we got approval to proceed.
So you mentioned that when it switched ownership that because you were using the grants, you had to use the prevailing wage, Title 36. So if we hadn't used the grants, would you have still had to? Or is that just contingent on the fact that you're a sub-entity of a government entity?
Would have been up to a little more gray area if we weren't using the grants, or whether we would have had to or not under ADA ownership. For sure, we do have to under IGU ownership, but under the ADA ownership, we're uncertain. We're considered less of a subdivision of the state or public entity than we are now through the IGU ownership.
Okay, thanks.
Mr. Britton, a couple of questions. How much additional wages are going to be paid than what was originally estimated based upon the federal law or state
So
law?
specifically we have two components to the project, two approaches to a project construction. The first is the tank itself, which is under a engineer procure construct contract. So that's a firm fixed price, and that approximately $32.5 million of our total budget. When we went back to the contractor to adjust that requirement, it added about $1 million to their original bid. It's hard to break it out in our balance of plant as far as specific wage additions, because we don't see in each contract the breakout between wages and materials, but I would estimate probably another close to $1 million between the two.
And you mentioned having to excavate an additional 5 feet at the southern end. First of all, there was drilling or core samples were taken?
We did, yeah. We did extensive geotechnical drilling, particularly where the tank is located. We did a substantial amount of testing in that area. We had test piles in place for a number of years, monitoring ground temperature. On the southern section, we did 5 borings that we felt should represent what the ground conditions were, particularly given we had all of the other data. And it didn't. That we had a section between where we did our 5 drillings, where all of the other drillings were for the tank, that proved to be different. So the section that we excavated was not represented by the borings that we did.
And the borings that were done, was that done by ADA or under the management of ADA, or when were those drill borings done?
The drill borings were done, some of them a number of years ago. The ones for the balance of plant work were done early in January, in February, so they were done during ADA's ownership of the entity. Yep.
All right. And there's no...
Though that was after the budget was approved by the bodies, though. That we used all of the other borings when we developed our preliminary budgets or our budgets for final authorization, and the other experience that we've had on the site. We have had operations on this facility for about 10 years now, 12 years, so which is...
So your total cost overrun right now looks to be like $5 million?
Yes, including about $2.3 million remaining in contingency. So if we expend the contingency that's still remaining, it would be about $5 million.
All right, so this extra excavation is about how much is it cost? Will it cost?
About $400,000 of the overrun.
All right. Mr. Roberts.
So is the extra amount going to be taken up by being able to increase the money that we get from a grant, or will it end up coming out of sets or some other funding source and thereby falling on the ratepayers?
Everything we do will fall on the ratepayers, either beneficially or negatively with regards to costs. So any grant we get or any reduction in debt we get benefits the ratepayers. Anything we expend has a cost component that if we have to take out loans or use cash, will become part of our rates. Everything we do becomes
And that's what I'm
part of our
trying to,
rates. Yeah,
to
so-
address is when we found out we had these overruns, were we able to get more grant money to cover them, or are we going to have to use other funding sources, thereby impacting the ratepayers negatively?
Our only grant funds that we have was the part of the $57.5 million that was originally granted by the state for the Interior Energy Plan. We have the $125 million of sets, so those funds are limited. We don't have any new grant funds. We are working with the borough and on the air quality issue as it relates to utilizing grant funds for conversions. But we don't have any new grant funds for any other aspects of the project at this time. We'll look forward to working together to identify and try and get as much additional funding as we can to benefit our consumers.
So are you saying that this project ends up using up the rest of the grant money, or you're just saying that because we will end up using the rest of the grant money, any costs added on to this project are still going to impact the ratepayers negatively?
The grant money is used up already between the purchase of Pentex and the work that was done on the North Slope and the other work done evaluating the Cook Inlet. The grant funds are fully utilized.
Okay.
The remaining funds available to the project are the portion of the SETS funds and the bonding. So moving past the two storage projects that we're working on right now, we'll be looking to have to bond to complete those projects.
Sure. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Ledesky.
I was just curious with the North Slope pad, has that transferred to IGU ownership yet?
It has not. The North Slope pad, the DNR issued public notices to be able to adjust the lease to ADA that would allow for normal, what I'll say, less restrictive requirements on who may lease that land. That lease is in negotiation with DNR right now, between DNR and ADA, and we're participating with ADA on those discussions. After that's finalized, then we would look to transfer that lease to IGU or leave it with ADA. Well, that decision needs to be made. The agreement is that to the extent there's any beneficial revenues or income from that lease, ADA has agreed in the purchase and sale that will flow through to the project. So that'll come back to the interior gas utility in whatever form it may come, whether it's monthly lease payments or if there was a lump sum payment from somebody that was to purchase it at some point, or whatever form it is. ADA did agree that those funds would come back to the project.
All right, go ahead.
So you see a number of pictures here of the large storage project we're working on. On this day, we were lifting the dome roof on top of the outer tank structure. And we had a number of our board members there for the day, and you can see our chair, Pamela, and myself in the bottom corner. So the current status of the project is that all of the excavation and major backfill is complete. That's for the tank and the balance of plant. The foundation we poured was 1,800 cubic yards. That was for the tank. The outer walls are installed. The wire winding and shotcrete is complete now until the final closure of the construction opening. So that's about 90% complete for the outer walls. The dome roof is installed, and the 9% nickel steel for the inner walls is arriving on site and being moved into the inner tank as we speak. The dome roof getting installed prior to winter was a critical piece of our schedule. What that facilitates is us being able to build the inner tank through the winter. So we essentially have a warehouse now that we're working inside, and they'll be able to keep heated and covered and out of the weather through the winter and allow them to continue work. Otherwise, they would have had to cease operations, because without the structure and the roof on, the welding of the 9% nickel steel would have been much too difficult to do in the winter conditions. But now we have the tank in place to provide that protection. So our long lead items are, for the balance of plant, our pumps, our boil-off gas compressors, our vaporizers are on order, and we're starting to finalize some of the smaller components now too, as far as valves, and our boilers are on order. So some of the critical items that could have been challenges to our schedule are on order and will be received in plenty of time for their installation in the spring and summer. The balance plant civil construction, we've installed a substantial amount of the pipe trenches, the foundations for our new offloading equipment, the foundations for the boiler room and our new control center, and the spill containment are substantially complete. We're still on schedule to meet our deadline for the December 31st, 2019 in-service commercial operation to still qualify for the state tax credit.
Excuse me.
Mr. Roberts.
So when this is done and you get the gas in and you're ready to go, do you have the transmission infrastructure in place to fully utilize that tank for the volume you intend to supply?
So the tank does a couple things for this project, and I think it was actually Gary Wilkin, Director Wilkin mentioned it's the heart of our project in that it provides the security of supply. So during periods of the winter, we'll have at all times a minimum of 5 days, but for many years as we develop now, it'll be much greater than 5 days of backup supply. It also allows us to increase the utilization of our liquefaction assets. So right now, the Titan facility that IGU now owns shuts down in the summertime for 3 or 4 days a week because we have nowhere to put that LNG. So what this tank allows is for us to run that facility more like 365 days a year. Obviously, we'll have some scheduled downtime for maintenance, but more consistently at a normal flat rate. We'll fill the tank throughout the non-peak season, and during the peak season, we can use it to increase delivered LNG available for delivery to customers. So without any increases in LNG production capacity, just utilizing the tank for the seasonal swing, we can add an additional 400,000 MCF of sales compared to what we do today. And today we sell about 800,000 MCF. So what that means in customer count, and it'll depend on what the makeup of our customers are, but if it was just all residential customers, we would be able to add 2,600 customers just through the addition of this tank. So, and your question specifically was, do we have the transmission system in place? Our system right now is made up of distribution pipelines. We don't actually have what's classified transmission in the natural gas industry yet. That would be a high pressure pipeline, but we have between IGU and the infrastructure that they acquired from Fairbanks Natural Gas, a total of about 210 miles of distribution piping network. About 140 of that don't yet have customers receiving service from it. So we have the piping network in place to substantially increase the volumes to customers. So that long answer to short answer, it would be yes.
But at that point, we're going to be ready to deliver the gas to the extra 2,600 possible customers, or is there going to have to be more infrastructure? I mean, I know you've got to move your smaller tanks out to North Pole. That was what they talked about the last time. Is there anything else that has to be done, or do you already have that in the plan to have that done so you're ready to go when this is completed?
So one of the other things I'll talk about shortly is the North Pole storage. And the North Pole storage is necessary to begin providing service to the piping network that IGU installed in 2015. And so that's planned to be completed by the end of 2019 also. So in 2020, we will have availability of gas service in both areas. And in the Fairbanks area, the piping that is installed is gasified now. So it's ready to go. The only thing we need to do is install a service line from the main to the consumer, and that'll be, each customer will require a service line. But the main distribution network is in place. And the vaporization equipment we're installing at this large tank, it's sufficient for substantial growth. So right now we sell about 6 million cubic feet a day on peak. Our vaporizers we'll have a total installed capacity of 48 million cubic feet. So it's planned for the future growth of our facility.
Ms. Dodge.
Lajewski. Thank you. You started to talk about what I was wondering about, and that's the service lines. So I presume you're going to have an effort between now and next fall to sign customers up and really be making a push to get 2,400 or to get additional customers with service lines and applications. And
Yeah, that was our first start, was to bring on Michelle. We will be re-engaging a conversion group, including the community in that effort. We'll be re-engaging with mechanical contractors, and we'll be looking at any programs that we can put forth to make the conversion easier with our customers. So we'll begin to start to actively seek customers, which is something we have not done for a long time. But yes, that's a big part of our work moving forward.
thank you.
Mr. Lajewski.
I'm just trying to remember what was the difference in cost, estimated cost, between doing a transmission line between the North Pole and Fairbanks system versus building out independent storage for North Pole?
So the transmission line, depending on the right-of-way, is about $1 million or so a mile. So if we were to be able to go straight down the levee, we would see something about $15 million for a high-pressure transmission line from our current storage to North Pole. The storage facility preliminary budget is at $11,660,000. That's yet to, are starting to move forward with the detailed engineering for that before we go to final investment decision. But so it's slightly less expensive. The transmission line, if Golden Valley was still using a high percentage of gas at their North Pole facility, it probably would have made the most sense. But given the facilities necessary, at least today, are for primarily the space heat customers, the storage is required. So we ultimately, it provides us an added level of feed into our system, and again, improves some of the security of supply.
Go ahead.
Got a question about the Titan plant. I remember when I was on the board, it was presented to us that the Titan plant wasn't really in a level of condition that you'd want it to be in for a public utility. It had some points of failure that was just seemed too risky, and I'm wondering if those have been addressed, if it's been brought up to a more reliable state.
So we can debate that question, I think, for some time. And for me, it's obviously a very personal question because I've been involved with that facility for many, many years, and that facility has provided reliable service to the community for 20 years. And so, in my view, the Titan facility is in good shape. There's always things that can be improved upon. I think what we've done over the years is managed the capital expense versus the required maintenance well. We have not deferred any maintenance at that facility. All of our major equipment receives major overhauls in accordance with the manufacturer's recommendations. Our engines get complete top ends at 10,000 hours, in-frame overhauls at 20,000 hours. We maintain in inventory a full backup of our large refrigeration compressor and motor. So we've got on the shelf that we can change out in a day and a half if something fails. We maintain that in the warehouse. We maintain complete rebuilds of our gas compression engines. We have our recycle compression. We have 2 of them. We can operate at that facility. It's a unique facility because we grew it over the years, and we can operate it in about 6 or 7 different scenarios. So if we lose our feed gas compressor, we can still liquefy. If we lose one of our recycle compressors, we can liquefy. If we lose one of our refrigerant compressors, we can still liquefy at different levels. So we have the ability to manage issues as they arise pretty effectively out of that facility. So, there's been questions of whether things meet code or don't meet code. The reality is we're inspected annually by the federal regulator, and we have an open communication with the federal regulator that we've had agreement to make adjustments to that facility over the years and make changes to, and we've done those things in cooperation with them. So I think we have a good facility. There are some components that are on the older side, but we continue to refurb and upgrade them. The engines continue to get upgraded as necessary. So, and the moving forward, the plan is for the new liquefaction, wherever that comes from, as we need to add liquefaction capacity for this project. Those will be new facilities.
Okay.
Mr. Roberts.
So if something catastrophic, maybe long-term or even for a few months would be probably really bad if you lost your gas supply. If something were to happen to Titan 1, what would be the backup to get us the gas for people who've switched over and are now dependent on it? Could you speak to that? And you're saying you talked about new sources coming up, but what kind of time frame are we going to be able to get those up in? Are we going to get them as fast as the storage tank and our expansion? So are we going to have a window of time where we're praying that nothing goes wrong, or do we have a solid plan to handle all that timing? How's that going to work?
Okay. So the new storage project is 5.25 million gallons of storage, and so once that tank is full, if we add the additional 400,000 MCF per year, that'll put our daily peak usage at somewhere around 90,000 gallons a day. So we will have in storage in Fairbanks up to 50 days of supply. Now where it starts to change is if we meet our demand growth profiles, and in order to meet our future demand growth, we have to add liquefaction capacity. Every time we add liquefaction capacity, it adds some improved security of supply, and that we've got additional liquefaction trains, or we're purchasing from somebody that has multiple liquefaction trains. We've done recently a security of supply study that indicated that throughout the expected demand growth, both on the 35% and 50% of the Cardinal curve, even if we had a week-long interruption to our LNG supply in the peak of winter, that we would still not drop down below 5 days of supply in our storage facility. If there was a catastrophic failure where we lost LNG supplies for months, that would be a different story. The design of our facilities are such that they have significant redundancy in different components, and so that the likelihood of something like that happening is extremely low as far as a catastrophic. You know, we've got fire separation requirements by code. We do additional fire separation for significant components, you know, the storage facility, multiple pump columns, multiple vaporizers, and then again with the additional trains on the liquefaction side. For a number of years we had a facility in Alaska, the ConocoPhillips facility, in which we had a backup interruptible agreement with and we could rely upon. That facility is not in service right now, although it's public that it's been purchased by Endeavor and that they're considering getting that facility going again in some fashion. So we're hopeful that'll be the case and we could possibly have a in-state backup agreement. In the short term, there's some supplies we could access in British Columbia, although that's a challenging backup plan and not one that you would want to rely on when we increase our demand fivefold. But at that point, we'll be looking at the redundancy in our own units. But the project itself, you know, we can't afford two of everything that sits there. So we'll do our best to make sure that we have a reliable supply to our customers, and we really are doing that. I mean, the storage project is a big component. Having additional storage in North Pole and the design approach in each one of those projects it has security of supply very much at first hand.
Are we able to have contracts for backup support from whoever supplies the whole Anchorage area, the whole bowl?
Anchorage is supplied with natural gas there's the only liquefaction facility in service in Alaska right now is the Titan facility.
Okay,
Since
so it's not a gas problem, it's a LNG problem.
it could be either. You know, you have each step of the way we have to make sure we have redundancy in that particular component. So, first of all, gas supply. What do we do with gas supply that feeds the liquefaction facility? Our contract that exists today is with the largest producer in the inlet that has fields all over the Cook Inlet. They don't rely on a single field or to satisfy their contractual commitments. So, and there's looping in the piping network. So we have a very secure gas supply that feeds our facility. The facility itself, we talked about the number of things we do to ensure that we have reliability, you know, multiple compressors, different operating profiles that we can utilize if one piece of equipment doesn't take down our entire production. In our transportation, from the liquid from our production facility to the storage, right now we have 17 trailers in our fleet. On a given day, peak day right now, we need 6. We move 6. So we have redundancy in our liquefaction fleet. In our storage, we have 2 storage facilities here in Fairbanks today. We've got the one in existence adjacent to the new project, and then the other one off of Shacked Road. So we have 2 feeds into the distribution system. We'll be adding the 3rd with North Pole and adding this larger tank. So each component we have to look at and make sure we have can rely on them.
Thanks. Ms. Dodge.
I actually have 2 questions. One is, I presume that to run a gas feeder to North Pole, you would need permits and some significant pre-work. And you haven't done any of that, right? I mean, it would be...
There's not been any gas transmission permitting started for North Pole. One of the challenges is that running the levee would be great, but there's the military facilities that could be competing interests along that area. When you're running a gas transmission system, your first preference is to be away from population. The closer you get to population, the more stringent the code requirements become in design, in your annual maintenance activities, and so it's all based on your proximity to population as to what different design criteria you have to meet and what different operating protocols you have to meet. So
And we haven't done any of that.
not for transmission system.
And also, you may be speaking to this later, but if not, where are we on the gas supply issue?
So the gas supply, we currently have an agreement with Hillcorp that takes us out to 2021. We're in active discussions right now on multiple fronts to look at longer-term supplies, including the representation from the Siemens Group that they are looking at additional LNG supplies as well. So gas supply is a key component for us. We're in discussions. There's indications that in the Cook Inlet, longer supply contracts are going to be available now as compared to the last number of years. So we're feeling like the gas supply will be looking to get a longer-term agreement in place in the next year.
How do you think the uncertainty of gas supply agreements will impact your people's willingness to sign up?
So I don't think we'll have uncertainty in gas supply agreements by that time. I think we will have solidified what our decision is going to be for additional liquefaction, whether that's a utility-developed liquefaction expansion or whether that's a contract through somebody like Siemens or Siemens. That decision will have been made and supported by a longer-term gas supply contract.
Thank you.
Let's take a break from the hot seat and watch a little video. All right. So we've got a quick time lapse of the dome roof being lifted in place just last week. The roof itself weighed approximately 200,000 pounds. And that's the largest crane in Alaska and doing the pick.
What What are all the rings up front?
So that right now, what they're doing is they're taking the dome roof and placing it on this, what we call a suspended ceiling. That suspended ceiling will get settled down on the top of the tank and is sealed to the tank. So that's the ceiling for the tank. And then the dome is the roof. So they put the dome on top of the suspended ceiling. It's rigged up with, I think they said, about 2,500 cables inside for the pick, and then ultimately that'll get released down into the top of the tank.
It's up there again.
The orientation of the roof, it was important because we have a structure on the inside that's going to be supporting our pipe columns and our piping system that are coming out of the roof. This tank, all of the piping comes out of the top of the tank and is what's called a double containment. So if there's a breach of the inner tank, the outer tank, the concrete, will contain that LNG and
Can we see that?
and ensure there's no spill beyond the tank itself.
Can we see it again now that we've seen it once? We have its context?
You want to see it again?
Yeah.
Okay.
I want to watch all the little ants now that I know what they're doing.
We had some nice music that went through it, but it doesn't seem like we had speakers here.
Interesting.
And we are keeping a time lapse of the entire project. So on the website, periodically, you'll be able to see different time lapses of the construction activities.
Is that one crane operator, or were there a few?
Just one.
Oh, I see. So that's where they were orienting it?
You'll see that again when they place it on top of the outer tank.
Better without the music.
At the
Your narration was really helpful.
So that opening you see in the bottom, that's what we call a temporary construction opening. That's where all of the work on the inner tank will be accessed from. I would like to recognize we've got another one of our board members. Patrice Lee has joined us. Thank you. So that's the Fairbanks storage project that we're working on. The IGU board recently approved the moving forward with engineering on the North Pole.
Excuse me, Mr. Britton, we have a question
Oh,
from Mr.
sorry.
Wojcicki.
I was just curious, is that now the tallest building in Fairbanks from base to top?
I think some of the stacks are taller.
Oh, the
than-
stacks on the power plants?
On the power plants may be taller. This will be about 105 feet, 108 feet when we're done. So I don't know if it's the tallest, but it certainly is a big structure. Yeah. So the next major project we're actively working on, the IGU board recently approved the additional engineering work necessary to finalize the North Pole facility design and budget, including we've signed an agreement with GVA for a early occupancy and option to purchase the land across the street from the refinery and their power plant. We've completed the phase one environmental assessment, which did not find a need to continue with additional environmental assessment. And we've done geotechnical work on the site as well and determined that it's suitable for what we're going to construct. And so we're moving forward with the detailed engineering, and we'll be moving forward with the bringing to the IGU board the close on the purchase of the land from Golden Valley Electric. It's initially a fairly small footprint. It'll have two 75,000-gallon bullet tanks that will move from the existing storage facility that adjacent to where the large tank is being installed. We're allowing provisions for expanded LNG storage at this site in the event Golden Valley becomes a consumer of LNG. We can increase, you can see circles there where we've got a 1 and 2 million gallon full containment tank potential. And then the remainder of the site underneath the red is Golden Valley's fuel storage, either naphtha or their jet fuel.
Right. Ms. Dodge?
I have a question for you. You had talked about 2,400 capacity for 2,400 additional customers. Seems like that's about the big tank we just saw. So what kind of additional capacity will these tanks provide?
These tanks really don't add a significant amount of sales capacity ability because it's limited to our 5 days of peak when we do our storage calculation, and this is only going to be 150,000 gallons. So it really doesn't change the utilization rate of our liquefaction in comparison to our storage. It's the big tank that does that.
So it's just a source to feed the North Pole, basically?
Primarily. It does...
Adds something, but not...
It adds something, but not material.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Roberts?
On that, I know that with the big tank, you can keep filling these so that it doesn't enter into the large equation of how many customers we can have out there. But just based on this capacity and its ability to feed customers, what is the capacity to, what can you do?
So the installed vaporization capacity, so from the pump capacity in this facility will be sufficient for the first 3 phases of the IGU development, phase 1, 2, and 3.
Ms. Dodge?
And where, you want to ask that, what phase are we at? Where are we piped to, phase 1?
Phase
One
2,
is-
right?
Phase 1 is piped.
Oh, just
Yeah.
phase 1?
Yeah.
Okay.
And 2 and 3 would be sets money and not...
2 and 3 will be bond funds
Okay.
that will come from 2 and 3.
Do we have any sets money left?
The sets money after completion of the 2 storage facilities will be fully drawn, and we'll have actually need to supplement that with either a small amount of load and funds. In the update I just gave to the IGU board on Tuesday, it's about an additional $3.5 million, so that'll either have to come from internal cash or from additional loan funds. At the time of sale between ADA and IGU, the entities had approximately $6 million in cash.
And what will be our total amount of debt at that point when we reach the end of these projects?
$125 million would be the total debt, and so that will be what's covered was the Fairbanks natural gas expansion, which was about $15 million, the interior gas utility piping network, which is about $29 million, about $40 million of sets funds used for the purchase of, $20 million of sets funds used for the purchase of Pentex, the remaining what came out of grant funds, and then the 2 storage projects.
And is the credit that we're getting back from the state going to be used as operating capital, or is it going to be used to pay down some of the loans that are maybe have a sooner maturity date than others?
So the capital appropriation was utilized to offset the purchase price of Pentex and was utilized for the initial development work for the interior energy plan. So the North Slope pad, the North Slope negotiations that went on with MWH, the RFP process for the Cook Inlet liquefaction, and those types of things.
No, I mean the money we get back as the storage credit from the state by finishing this by the end of 2019, where is that cash going to go?
So that'll be up to the IGU board, but that cash will go likely into additional investment in infrastructure, either to start off with phase 2 of the North Pole system or additional customer service lines. It'll be reinvested. It's not intended to pay down any of the SETS debt, given that the SETS debt comes with extremely flexible provisions. It's a 15-year deferral with no principal and no interest, and a 0.25% interest after 15 years. In addition to that, it has a ability to further defer by 5 years if the demand profile is not being met as expected. So there's no plan to pay that debt down any sooner. We'll use it to
Right, I knew-
avoid taking on additional bond debt.
I knew about those good terms. I just didn't know if we had other debt outside of the SETS debt.
So the Fairbanks Natural Gas and Titan have a minor amount of commercial debt right now, totaling just over $1 million for LNG trailers. But other than that, there's no material debt within the entities beyond the SETS funds.
Thank you.
Mayor Castle.
Yeah, I was wondering, the standby storage capacity balance between Fairbanks and North Pole, if we had a supply shutdown, are the same amount of days of storage capacity in both ends of this?
No, the design of in the initial years, yes. I mean, the 2 tanks in North Pole for the first couple of years will provide over 5 days of storage. After the demand grows, rather than installing additional storage in North Pole, the idea is then we would utilize the large tank as our security supply, and if there was a supply disruption, we would be able to shuttle. So we have the ability to fill tanks from the storage facility, the large storage facility, and so that's how we will provide the increased level of security supply.
That was my follow-up question. Thank you.
And both facilities are being designed that we can deliver LNG straight into the vaporization equipment from a transport. And so that if there was any need to isolate the tank or tanks, we could still deliver LNG through our vaporization equipment straight out of the transports. So.
Ms. Dodge.
Thank you. So current operating costs, so right now FNG is delivering LNG to 1,000-ish customers, right? Are we fairly cost neutral right now, or are we?
Yeah, substantially cost neutral. Slightly, we accrue a small amount of cash annually, somewhere in the $500,000 to $600,000 range after covering our capital improvements for the entities, for Fairbanks Natural Gas and Titan. On a book basis, we show a book loss related depreciation, but on a cash basis, we're cash positive, but close to neutral.
And how much do you expect to spend on customer service lines, and where's that money coming from?
The customer service lines will, again, come either from bonding debt or internal cash flows. It's anticipated that we'll be needing to go out into the bond market soon.
How much do you expect to need? Ish.
It depends on the decision related to the LNG supply and the decisions related to when phases 2 and phases 3 are triggered for the North Pole expansion. But it is anticipated that the full $150 million of bond funds will be needed if we complete phase 2 expansion, phase 3 expansion, and the demand is such that we have to add Titan 1 and 2, so we'd be increasing LNG production by approximately 200,000 gallons a day from where it is today. If the choice was to go with a different supplier for LNG, that would avoid bond costs associated with capital investment in liquefaction capacity.
So maybe I'm asking the wrong question. If Van has natural gas going in front of his house, because I don't, so I can't use me as an example, how much would it cost him, and how much would it cost FN or IGU to stub up into his house? And
So-
how are we paying for that?
So the utility contributes to the cost of the service line. What we charge is $50 for the service line for the first 100 feet. In addition to that $50, though, was in the last 2 years was a new mandate from the pipeline regulator, PHMSA, to install what's called an excess flow valve. And so there's an additional $175 charge related to that excess flow valve installation. So the total cost to the customer is $225 for the first 100 feet. The utility covers the rest.
Right.
The average residential service line is going to be somewhere in the $1,000 range for that.
Thank
So
you.
the utility will fund the offset, the rest.
Mr. Lejeski.
That brought up another question, just terminology. So I'm curious, what's the excess flow valve? Does that stop too much gas from going into the house in case there's a problem?
So yeah, so we install the excess flow valve as close to the main connection as practical. And so the idea behind it is that in the event there's a break in the service line between that excess flow valve and the home, that it would shut. So what it does is it is sized for a normal flow rate for the whatever size you install. If the flow exceeds that normal flow rate, it closes because something's not right, whether there's a line break inside the home or a line break outside the home, and so it'll cut off gas service. They are designed, we have had some concerns with installing them in our environment. We haven't had any issues yet, but we don't have many installed. They are designed to reset so that when whatever caused it to trip and shut off, it's got a small weep hole in it, so when the pressure equalizes, it resets itself. So in the middle of winter, if something were to happen, we should be able to get gas service back to that consumer in a reasonable time frame once whatever the problem was is corrected. We have to be careful with it, and it's a communication issue with our customers in that they have to be honest and communicate with us when they make changes to their appliances. Because if we install one thinking they have a 200,000 BTUs worth of connected capacity, and next thing you know they have 500,000 BTUs, they could trip it themselves and create issues.
So it could potentially stop a house from blowing up.
It's an added safety feature. In the event there's a break in the line, it's meant to stop the gas flow. And first it started out as a voluntary program for residential customers. We had to make it voluntary to every one of them. And then they moved to, the PHMSA first moved to mandatory now. We had to, any service line change or new service line must have one installed. And then they recently added commercial consumers to that. So we now must install a excess flow valve or a shutoff valve on the service line. So those are new regulations in the last few years.
The chair doesn't stop me, I'm going to...
Go ahead.
Okay. So then back to your comments about the LNG tanker trucks. And it sounded like, this is what I heard, and I want to make sure I'm hearing the right thing. It basically sounds like, let's suppose our tank had no gas in it. You could actually back up a truck and directly, you're basically using the tank on that truck as the entire system's LNG supply. You could gasify that directly into the lines in the ground.
That's correct.
So therefore, if you had enough trucks, you could just keep cycling them out. I don't know how long they would last, under peak demand, if it would be like 30 minutes or 5 hours, but you could keep cycling them out and then keep the system pressurized.
That's correct. That's the idea. Our newest units are 12,300 gallons of capacity each. At the large storage facility, we can bring 2 units in at a time. And so as we move, right now our peak is about 60,000 gallons a day, so we'd have to cycle through 6 trucks, 5-6 trucks, but in the future that goes up to several 100,000 gallons a day, so we'd have to have a lot more. But it's meant to be an added safety factor. In the event we had to, for some reason, isolate that tank for a period of time, we could continue flowing gas to the... We're not anticipating ever having to isolate the tank, but it's an added... These tanks, once they're in service, there's generally no reason to isolate them from the system. So, but as a backup, additional security of supply, we felt prudent that we would provide for that potential.
Oh, for me.
Ms. Dodge? No question. Mr. Roberts?
So now that we're looking here and thinking about the North Pole Phase 1, a comment you mentioned earlier, much earlier, was how we're going to get back into signing people up. And I'm thinking, did we ever get active actually getting people to agree to sign up when we were doing Phase 1 or at any point for people who we wouldn't be able to do until we got a gas supply? Was that something that happened in the past with FNG or IGU?
With FNG, over the years, there was periods of time where we were actively seeking customers when we would add storage facilities or liquefaction, or in the early years that we were actively seeking customers. Once we started to have supply constraints, then we ceased. In North Pole, as part of the IGU development, they did a number of surveys in the area to measure or to solicit interest. There was never an active list established for people committing to put the gas in because there wasn't a definitive time frame for when that would be available. So there's been, I would say, somewhat of an education or communication program, but that'll need to increase significantly.
Okay, so I had a constituent tell me something like they got approached, but yet there was like a restriction where they couldn't have another source of heat if they did it. I don't know if that was you or they're confusing it with some old borough ordinance on AQ. Was there anything like that discussed with people, or was it just a, are you interested in the future type of light deal?
Not that I'm aware of. I certainly wasn't involved in any discussions where we would restrict somebody. We have in the past, because of the utility investing in the service line along with the consumer, we've required that they sign what I call a 6-month agreement. And so we say, you know, as long as you convert and begin using gas within 6 months, we will, your cost will only be the $50. And at that time, that was it because there was no excess flow valve.
But you
But
don't
if you
have a
don't
restriction on backup heat.
No, we do have some requirements for backup heat for interruptible customers. We have a number of customers are on our system which are interruptible. So we use those for during the peak of winter. If we have any supply constraint issues, those customers switch to their alternative. But we've never, at least when I say we, I'm new to IGU, so I'm not aware that IGU or FNG has ever indicated that somebody couldn't have a backup supply to natural gas.
Thank you.
So the North Pole facility, we are targeting completion again to be in service in the fall and by the end of 2019, so that it too would qualify for the State of Alaska storage tax credits. We have actively working on a project as our engineers is PDC, Shannon Wilson providing some of the geotechnical, and CHI engineering as LNG experts. Any questions on North Pole storage before I move on?
They've been asked.
So what are our next steps? What's important as we move forward? And we've talked about natural gas conversion. That's a huge part of this project, and the larger the demand as we move forward, the lower the cost will be over time, and the greater the benefit to the environment. So this is a community project for the community's benefit, and commitment to conversion is going to be important, and we're going to seek anything possible that will help with that. So, you know, we've been in discussions with the solid fuels grants for change out of solid fuels and making sure natural gas conversion is appropriate for that. We've reached out to USDA to find out if there's grants available or low-cost interest funds available. Whatever potential is out there, if anybody's aware of anything, please let us know. We'll be actively seeking ways to help consumers with defray conversion costs and ensure we meet our demand profiles. And again, Michelle's got a lot of work to do in front of her. So we'll continue with the implementation of the combined utility integration plan. It's transitioned now that the IGU offices are substantially closed. We have kept the meeting room for the board meetings, at least for now. But all of the support functions for the interior gas utility are out of the Fairbanks Natural Gas, their facilities. Likely in the not too distant future, I would expect that you see the Fairbanks Natural Gas name fade into the past, and that we're certainly starting to refer to ourselves more and more as just simply the interior gas utility.
Where are the FNG headquarters?
International Street, so between Van Horn and 30th. We have our office there, and our warehouse facilities are there. We'll begin, we are participating in the air quality stakeholder group. Director Lee is the representative for the IGU board on that group. The board will continue to refine and develop the policies it feels are important to the operation of the utility. The North Pole site will go through the final engineering and hopefully start the construction phase. And we'll finalize what our options are for the LNG supply. We'll get a definitive direction on where we're going. Is this going to be utility developed liquefaction investment, or does the alternative proposals being considered make sense for the utility? So we have a lot of work ahead of us. The board has been meeting weekly again. They have work session every other Tuesday and a board meeting every other Tuesday, essentially. And so our volunteer board is working extremely hard to make sure we're keeping all of these things moving. A couple of helpful links. We've still got the interior gas utility. It has a substantial amount of information, and we're trying to increase the amount of information on there. You'll find the video of the tank move. You'll now find the recordings of the IGU board meetings are now posted on the website again. There continues to be a lot of resources related to the Interior Energy Plan on the AIDA website. The Fairbanks Natural Gas website has some particular information for historically and for customer additions. And then the legislature, as you know. And the last one, it's extremely important to us, and we spend a lot of time and effort actually to this, is communication and education of the public and protection of our assets. And call before you dig. 811 is a service that can be called by contractors, homeowners, utilities. If you're doing any work in your yard that includes excavation, or a project that you're doing that includes excavation, please call 811. We provide free locates of our facilities, and it's expensive and dangerous when they're damaged. So we continually look to reduce the amount of third-party damages done to our system. So call 811.
Mr. Britton, question.
That I'm
regarding-
open to questions.
Yeah, let me ask you one on 811. Is that just specific to IGU, or does that get you information on other utility lines as well?
So unfortunately in Fairbanks we don't have 100% participation in 811 with all utilities, but both IGU and Fairbanks Natural Gas has been a member for a long time. IGU has been a member since it started. So you will get information on telephone, fiber optic, gas. The two utilities that don't participate right now are Golden Valley Electric and the water companies. Water and sewer aren't members of 811 unless they've recently joined. But all other utilities are.
What's your estimate on how many electric lines are buried in this for GVA?
Not a lot, actually, compared to most other jurisdictions. There's very little buried electric. I don't know what the percentage is of their system, but it's not a lot. And in other jurisdictions I've worked, it's nowhere near what most other places are. Most of our stuff is aerial.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, questions? Well, it looks like we're questioned out.
I'll ask.
Oh, Mr. Lejeski. Yeah.
I remember when I was on the board, it seemed that the board had a general opinion that once it became a real utility with real customers, that it would begin to pay itself a stipend. Has that come up amongst the board, now that it is a real utility?
I haven't, I'm not aware of that discussion. It certainly hasn't been on any of our agendas yet, no, it hasn't been discussed.
All right, any further questions? Speak now or forever hold your peace. Mr. Britton, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Wilkins, Ms. Lee, and Ms. Holloway. Thanks for being here, and good luck.
All your hard work.
All right, we move on to advance ordinance and resolutions. ordinance number 2018-30, an
jumped right in
ordinance
mine.
reauthorizing various Fairbanks North Star Borough boards and commissions. The sponsor is Mayor Castle. Mayor, may we have a staff report?
Certainly can. I'll go to Mr. Williams for that report.
Thank you, Mayor. So before the assembly is a housekeeping ordinance, and I'll do my best to keep it long so you're not disappointed tonight, and
Thank you.
I'll go to it. So before you is a list of boards and commissions. They were last authorized in 2012. It's about 13 boards, commissions. You can read the list for yourself. It's just per code we have to reauthorize these periodically. So there's really not much more to say about that. So I'm happy to take questions.
All right, questions. Ms. Dodge?
The Investment Advisory Committee, isn't that one that we had discussion about during budget, and that it's been fairly quiet, as in almost inactive?
They meet biannually, every other year, I believe. It's yes, it is very quiet, and they're looking at kind of long-range investment policy. That doesn't change very often.
Thank you.
Mr. Roberts?
So if we get 5 no's, then all those commissions go away? Do we have a dollar number on what that would save the borough in a year?
I don't have a dollar number. I can guess. I mean, just staff time, and I'd have built a spreadsheet.
Just curious. Don't put too much staff time into that.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate that.
Well, just from my personal perspective, these commissions, I think they all do some pretty important work, so I won't be one of the 5. All right. Avoiding further debate, any other questions or discussion regarding this ordinance? All right, let's move on to briefings from the borough mayor.
Oh, we're going too fast here. We've been crazy busy with the week of air quality on us. We've got guests from out of town from the EPA and guests from the state DEC. Our EPA guests are from the state of Washington and from Washington, D.C., and we've got folks from Juneau and Anchorage here, as well as our staff working hard. We've been at it since Tuesday morning, all day Tuesday, yesterday and today, and including some meeting get-together. And we've been getting a lot done. And I've been very impressed by all parties concerned. They've done a lot of homework since we met last year at this time. We're the air quality family. We said it was like a Thanksgiving family reunion, getting everyone together. And it might be a good analogy because we sometimes fight like family members, but at the end of the day, we're still all in it together and realize that we've got to figure out how to work together. That's really the only option to make progress on this. Those folks are sticking around for tomorrow. We kick off the Clean Air Conference, or Clear the Air Conference, over at Wedgwood Manor, and there's just, it's new. We've made some adjustments. We've included some new programs, a variety of different things. We stepped up and bought a couple of new stoves because we've been trying to have a demonstration the first and second year of Clear the Air by showing the difference of an individual device and how you can operate it properly or not properly and how that affects the emissions, because we've said repeatedly that the operation of a device is at least as important as the device itself. And so we bought 2 identical stoves because we've been struggling with the manufacturers. They would like to demonstrate on how clean their devices are, and they don't want to provide us a device for operating it poorly and take pictures of their great quality stove puking smoke out across the parking lot. And so we finally, after having people back out on us at the last minute, we said this year we're just going to get the stoves ourselves and do this because we were guessing there would be high value in it. And so far the preliminary numbers that we are getting from our experimenting with this over at Air Quality are the demonstration is surpassing what even we thought, and we're graphing not only the amount of emissions that you can see visually and technically, but the heat output is even surprising us, the difference. Over the entire burn session, our expectation was that as the fire burned on for a period of a couple hours, the good burn or the poor burn would improve as the wood dried out in the firebox, and you would get more similar performance from the two devices. And we're finding that isn't as close as what we were expecting, and the wet wood stays wet right till the bitter end, and you continue to get a significant amount of heat, better heat out of the properly operated device. So anyway, we're going to be demonstrating that over at Wedgwood Manor with our stoves, and people can come on by and take a look at that and the graphs that we're putting together to show the economics associated with this is dramatic because of the heat output difference. Can be double. Not just like 10 or 15 or 20%, but can be double. And wow, that saves you dollars, And some of us have been burning wood for quite a while, kind of get a feel for that, but it's more dramatic than our expectations so far. So we'll see how that goes, but there's a lot of other things. The Wood Burners group is doing a couple presentations there. They've been engaged with our stakeholders group, and they're going to do some presentations on some of the challenges in front of us and the impacts on the community as we try to move forward and the different things we have to consider. It is a complex problem, so I'm looking forward to hearing from them, some health presentations, of course, and on, as well as a discussion with the regulators and a visit by Ken Wagner, who's the number 2 man in EPA and from Washington, D.C., kind of doesn't get any better than that, and he'll be there also. So come on over. It's free all day tomorrow and Saturday. Starts at 8 in the morning at Wedgwood Manor, and we'll be providing some refreshments. We've got a few door prizes we can hand out, some trade fair vendor tables, a couple of them, and a wealth of information and lots of opportunity to ask questions. And also we'll have some short sessions where you get to vote on different things too with our instant voting tools. Will be there, and we'll be seeing how that goes, collect some more data and information. So it's kind of exciting. I hope you have time to stop by, at least for a little while. And we do ask you to go to Air Quality AQ Fairbanks, our website, Air Quality website. You can get the whole schedule and pick out what sessions you want to attend and which ones maybe you have other things you'd rather do. And we ask that you sign up just so that we have a better count for food and the requirements for that, for the refreshments that we're providing. So that's been my week, trying to work on cleaning up the air, and I'm available for questions.
Ms. Dodge.
Thank you. Let me turn my little mic up. My first question, I suspect I know the answer to, but is there any way to easily put an ESP on those stoves and do that test also? And I understand a hot stack probably would not be one you want to drop an ESP in. And I imagine that the answer would be if we could do 4 stoves, then we could show good burn, green burn, good burn ESP, green burn ESP. That would just be really interesting.
So the operative word in your question was easy, and the answer is no.
Yeah.
For this year, but it's something that we're thinking about for next year. We need a little more time. We don't have the devices, so to get it put together by tomorrow.
Yeah. Well, you still have an hour or two.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
I have a couple more if I might. Sure. So first of all, I want to say that I'm hearing really good things about the stakeholders group. Just people are saying that they're having great conversations and really coming to some good outcomes. And I want to give kudos to everybody. And I heard that Dr. Hanley has a new presentation, and I was curious. That's very interesting. And I guess I need to go to AQ Fairbanks and see if he's presenting.
He is presenting tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock.
Thank you. And
Go ahead.
thank you. I have a quasi-bizarre question I could ask maybe offline, but I've been seeing a lot of different piles of wood, lots of new wood, call them the sheds, wood sheds going up, and I've realized that what looks to me as a non-burner, because I don't have a fireplace that functions, to be a lot of wood is actually probably just an amount of wood that maybe is just the amount that one would burn during a winter, taking the chill off in the evening. And I was curious, I've been trying to get a feel for what is, if someone is burning a lot, how big is that pile versus someone that's taking the chill off and kind of burning
So
in a more, I don't know what the word is.
there's quite a bit of variability with how much wood you need to burn and what you're doing, whether it's just an accent to have a romantic fire in your fireplace, or if you're really trying to exclusively heat your home and you got a big home, there's quite a bit of variability there. At my house, I go through about a cord and a half a year is all, because it's very efficient. I think the optimum size for a woodshed, ideally you want to have capacity to comfortably hold 2 years worth of wood, so that you can plan a year ahead and not be this year cutting wood you're going to use this winter, but get it in your shed. So you rotate back and forth between the two halves of your woodshed, and you're planning a year out. And it'll dry great that way. It gives you plenty of time then. So that's the ideal situation. Looking at cords, if folks are wondering, I mean, you need, cord is 4 feet by 4 feet by 8 foot cube. Thinking of a sheet of plywood and building a kind of a coffin shape out of plywood, full sheets, you'd end up with a cord of wood, cubic space-wise. And a lot of folks burn in the neighborhood of, I would say 5 cords isn't out of the ordinary for a lot of people.
Okay.
So
Thank you.
do the geometry.
That's really helpful.
Mayor, the conference this weekend, or starting tomorrow, is at Wedgwood. It's at the same in the same building as it was last year?
Yes, it is. Same building as last year. They're at the old rec center, which is now a visitor center in the middle of the Wedgwood complex.
All right.
Pretty easy to find.
Any other questions for the mayor?
I just wanted to thank you for recognizing the stakeholders group, and I want to say thank you to FEDCO, because they've really coordinated it and put it together. They went to great lengths to make sure we were having as broad a representation across our community there. Couple of seats for the woodburners group, and they're the only demographic that has 2 seats. The rest of the demographic type groups we're looking at, like point sources and et cetera, have 1 seat at the stakeholders group. And so it's a large group, and because the seats are spread out over such diversity, it's generating, as you commented, some really lively discussions, good questions, and really digging into this. So it has been a good group, and huge kudos to FEDCO for putting that together for us.
All right, Ms. Dodge.
And I hear, it sounds like they're coming up with some very creative proposals, too, that as a result of that broad, deep conversation. So that's exciting.
They are. I have been pleasantly surprised. They have an understanding of the issues, and they've done a lot of research on what has worked elsewhere and might be applicable here, and what has worked elsewhere that doesn't work here. And I think they're making progress. I'm hopeful, because my discussions this week with EPA is they really want to rely on the stakeholders group, and they're more than willing to take a close look at those things that may have worked elsewhere but don't apply in Fairbanks. And so they're willing to customize what we're doing here to our community, and I got to applaud them for that. They have some constraints also, however, like the Clean Air Act, which is law. They can't change that. But they're really leaning hard on their own regulations to see where they can create some flexibility to work with us. And the ESP project is one of the examples of that, as a matter of fact, where they have certain protocols that they're stretching to the limits, and maybe then some, to try to accommodate our program in a scale and a cost that we can actually afford to gain some valuable data. Maybe it's not a bomb-proof, long-term regulatory data system that they normally require for regulatory processes, but it'll get us enough data that we can fine-tune it, and maybe they'll want to carry things forward. As Mr. Roberts had pointed out, this could be opening a door for them to get more engaged in the topic too. So I was really pleased that they were willing to do that, and they've confirmed that during this week that they're willing to do that on other topics also, and the state of Alaska. So we'll see where this goes. None of this is final. You know, these discussions are ongoing. We've got a couple more stakeholder groups before they make a recommendation, and then that recommendation is just their final recommendation, but there's a lot of tooling and work to it once that comes to us and to you. So a lot of work to be done yet, but I'm very pleased with the stakeholders group and the different agencies we're working with.
All right. Any other questions for the mayor? All right, then let's go to assembly business and comments. I'll start on my right. Mr. Lejeski.
No comment.
Mr. Gray.
I have no comment at the moment.
Ms. Major.
Just one comment. I'll be flying out late tonight, and I'll be out through next week for work travel.
All right, well, we'll miss you. Mr. Roberts.
No comment.
Ms. Dodge.
No comment. Well, heck. It's apparently I'm the vocal one tonight. IGU, I thank you for the scheduling the update. It's encouraging to see they're making progress, and I look forward to celebrating further progress.
All right. The policy board for FMATS met yesterday, and we're still in the process of transitioning from an MPO that is kind of a hybrid, which, well, I'm not even going to try to describe it, but we're headed towards being a nonprofit corporation where the members are the two cities and the borough and the state. That progress has been kind of delayed because of concerns from various attorneys, including our own, about the authority of the policy board to do this. We want some confirmation. In fact, the Assembly is going to be asked to consider a resolution soon on this transition. And I also would ask, since I've been on FMAS now for 2 years and won't be next year, I wish more people were here, but on the Assembly. But it's an important, a very important commission or board. It deals with $8.5 million worth of transportation funding coming to this area every year, and so I would urge the three members here who will be serving next year to consider FMAS. And frankly, if you're going to get on it, you should plan on being on it for several years, because there's a learning curve to it. As far as as far as business is concerned, on Thursday, that would be a week from today, September 27th, the audit committee will meet at 3 p.m. in the Salsha conference room. On that evening, at 6 p.m., this assembly will have a regular assembly meeting here in the Mona Lisa Drexler Assembly Chambers. And then Tuesday, October 2nd, is the municipal election day for the borough, the city, and the cities of Fairbanks and North Pole. In-person absentee voting is happening now. I've voted. They're open. The clerk's office for all three municipal clerk's offices are open from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Anything else for the good of the order? We are adjourned. Nope. All right. You made it. You made it, Mayor.
That's right.
You mentioned FMATs, and yes, we had an exciting, enthralling meeting Wednesday. And Ms. Dolan has drafted the resolution that you referenced, Mr. Lawrence, and I forwarded that to the other two mayors for consideration for their councils to take a look at. It is a draft, so it's not final. You also have a doodle poll request for a meeting, and in the near future, like in a week, October 8th, I think, Mr. Lawrence. Anyway, at that meeting, we can discuss the resolution, see if it fits the other two cities' needs, and do whatever editing we want, and then we will bring that to the Assembly as quick as we can. It is kind of a high priority project for us to make sure that FMATS has the authority granted from us and the other councils, other legislative bodies, to do what we all want to do. You know, and it's just crossing T's and dotting I's, but it is a high priority. Thank you.
Okay.
You better do it quick, buddy.
Anything else for the good of the order? We are adjourned.
I'll be gone next week too, actually.
Coming at 8 o'clock sharp.